When did recording start? So recording has started. Welcome all to the user group meeting in Power BI User Group Denmark, where we today have the pleasure of having Reza Doranni and also Charles Sterling, who will join us in a few minutes. I will, in a few minutes, give them the possibility to present themselves before they do the presentation about the Power Automate and Power BI Desktop. But let's just kick off with some information about what's coming in the user group here the next coming days. So welcome all, and some housekeeping rules. Please remember to mute yourself during the session. You can use the chat, and we will also record the meeting and post it on our YouTube channel later today or tomorrow. And we do have some other events planned. Next week, we'll have Mike Carlo from Power BI.tips to give us an introduction to Articulator. And you can sign up via Meetup. And then in August, we have another secret event. And I'll just mute people. They are muted. In August, a secret event. We can't reveal what is happening, but I promise you it will be fun. It will be for Danish people only, or Danish-speaking people, I guess. But keep an eye on what's happening in Meetup as well. And then we actually have sort of our first in-person Power BI conference in Copenhagen, where Just and Askia and myself are also involved in the program committee, are having a conference called Power BI Next Step, and that is on the 17th of September. And you can sign up to that conference using the link here. And for the first 50 participants, there's actually a very attractive prize here. But I'm really looking forward to that. It will not be a beginner Power BI conference. We will focus on medium and advanced topics. So really looking forward to that. But I will stop presenting now and hand it over to Reza and Chuck to tell us a little bit about how we can utilize Power Automate within Power BI Desktop.
Thank you, Eric. Can you folks hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So my name is Charles Sterling. I'm a senior program manager here at Microsoft, now on the Powerapps team. I've interacted with a lot of you. I see Lars in the camera. Lars, give us a wave. Yeah, I've actually interacted with Lars on several different events and going back when I was in the Power BI team. So nice to actually seeing, and Hans Christian, I actually see him on the call. And me and Eric have actually done several presentations, I think together. And the last one was in Florida, in Tampa. We were hanging out with Ted Pattison in the last World Tour, back when we actually used to meet in person. Do you guys remember that, when we used to meet people? That was actually a ton of fun. And before that, yes, it's almost a laughing / crying. It was interesting is the MVP summit before that, the year earlier. So we're talking about like 3 or 4 years ago. The very first presentation I saw outside of a Microsoft person on this particular topic was by Eric itself. Eric was actually going out. At that point, I don't even think we could actually use the custom visual. What he actually did was the same hack as I did, was we were using iframes inside of the dashboard. So this is how far Eric's expertise goes back with integrating Powerapps and Power BI. So if you have any questions and you can't get a hold of me or Reza or Daniel Christian, another resident expert in this space, Eric knows this stuff. He's actually been tracking it for a while. I know I'm going to introduce Reza again, But this Reza is Reza Doranni. Most of you guys know Reza Rad, so we actually got the better Reza for this event. Just don't tell my New Zealand friend that. And Reza Doranni is actually one of the MVPs who actually focuses both on Power Platform. He's a dual awarded and Power Automate. And I actually chose him to work with me when we first got the very first build of the Power Automate custom visual. So he's actually seen it as long as me. And as a matter of fact, the first builds didn't hand in the table as a table. What it was handed in is parallel or related, not unrelated arrays in XML. So we actually had to go through and index these multiple arrays to actually make it look like a table, and he actually helped me with that. So some of the workarounds that I actually did in those earlier videos or earlier demos, actually Reza Doranni helped me with. So he actually has as much context with this, and he's going to be doing the demo. I'm going to be sneaking out a little bit. But what I thought I would do is actually walk through some of the different use cases and much more importantly, some of the questions I get asked and the confusion that actually comes from this. So I apologize that I can't put these slides in presenter mode. I actually thought that was because of the Spanish Summit. What were we using? We were using Slido, not Slido, something else. Not slide deck. Anyways, but it turns out that the last Windows update, PowerPoint just doesn't like presenting on the screen. So this is the view that we're going to get. What we're going to do is we're actually going to go out and cover a couple different ways that you can actually make your Power BI and Power Apps and Power Automate integrate and action those reports. So I'm not going to read the agenda. We're actually just going to dig in, but we're actually going to go out and talk about some of the questions we get in our internal Microsoft user group. So I want to repeat that is inside of Microsoft, we actually have a lot of our field folks go out and create these user groups. So one is called Worldwide Communities Power Platform. And the question I get probably once every 2 months is I want to add rows to a Power BI data set. And I see that Power Automate has this action called add rows to data set. How much more clear can it get? The person saying, I want to add rows. There's an action that says add rows to data set and for Power BI. And it seems like it's a natural solution in all cases. It turns out rarely is this ever the solution. This is almost never going to solve their problems. And before I move on, I want to see if people know why. So Eric, I'm going to take you out of the equation real quick. But maybe Lars or Hans or some of the other folks that actually have been playing with this for a while, why is this not the solution for our, our field folks that want to go out and help customers add rows to a Power BI data set? Lars, I'm going to pick on you since your camera's on.
Yeah, well, this is a streaming data set. You will be.
That's exactly it. Bing, right off the gate. So Lars, Hans, you didn't even get a chance to answer. And you know what's actually sad or interesting is it used to be called add rows to streaming data set. It was renamed. Maybe Reza could actually point out when it was renamed, but a couple months ago, 4 or 5 months ago, ish, in that magnitude. And I don't know why. I don't know who renamed it because the action actually came from the Power BI team. So maybe I should actually ask McGill Myers, who owns the streaming data set functions, why it was renamed, because this is actually a little bit confusing. But let's actually go out and show a demo of one of those applications working. So here I have, matter of fact, I have a lab for this. And when I was in Ireland, we actually walked through and built this in an hour. So this application goes out and has a streaming data set. You can see it's empty right now. It has a little lightning bolt. And this is actually another streaming. No, it's not. This is actually using a direct query against the streaming data set itself. So there's actually two different things. But let's go ahead and give Reza. Reza actually is already at 50. He's so far above the game that he's not even playing the same game anymore. So let's actually go out and see if we can give him a little humility by taking a couple points. So he's actually already putting the link in actually how you can actually action this. And what you can see is that yeah, there we go. So you can see the last score was -10. A little bit of humble pie for Reza, and he's still so far above. He's playing a different game. And I don't know if you noticed that these were actually all different times. And if you keep attending the Amsterdam user group, I'm sure that they actually have a session. Peter Myers does a lot of sessions on streaming data sets. Maybe you'll have Peter Myers come in and he'll talk about why the direct query versus the streaming data set has different latencies. They're actually looking at the data at different points in the architecture. But this looks like a Power BI report. But like Lars said, it's all built on, let's actually show you that. So if I go back out in here, and I'm actually going to show you this in Flow. So if I go to Flow, Power Automate, that's $1 in the cookie jar, isn't it? If I go to Power Automate and I go out and say, create instant flow, and I will do a automated cloud flow, and we'll call this one Eric. Actually, let's call it Lars. Lars is the helper bee of the day, and apparently in camel case. And what I want to do is, I actually just want to do this instant. What did I do? It's actually looking at, I want to do an instant. So instant, here we go. And now we'll call it Lars, and we'll actually take the caps off. Lars is not going to S in it. And what I'm going to do here is when I manually trigger this, because we're actually not going to look at it, we will actually go out and add a row. And I just want to show you what Lars is talking about. So if I go out and take a look at Power BI, and by the way, this refresh, if we've got time, Eric is actually going to show how you would actually action this. And it actually goes back into the Power Automate button where you can do it directly from the report. So hopefully I will give Eric enough time to show this one, but this is actually the one that we're talking about right now. I'm using a workspace called Chaz1. Let's go ahead and take a look at that workspace. There it is. The data set, this is actually what I want to show you. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 data sets. But if I actually go to data sets here, you'll actually see I have, I don't know, a dozen, and I have a whole bunch that's not listed. And then the reason being is it is only showing you, as Lars said, those streaming data sets. So rarely are you building it. So how do I go out and add data to my, my real data set? And it actually has to do with, it depends on what kind of data set you're having. Now, in this case, where you actually want to have near real-time interaction, where I'm going to actually put a record in it and you want to see that record, I would recommend direct query in all cases if you possibly can. Some notable exceptions that you just can't be like SharePoint. We don't have a direct query interface, in which case what you have to do is you have to go out, issue the refresh that Eric is going to show you, and then signal when it actually goes out and finishes, and then actually issue a visual refresh. That's going to be important. I think I have a slide on that in a second. So let's go back into here, and I think I actually have a Dataverse report. And this is actually using direct query. I used to demo this all the time against SQL Server. Since Dataverse has now got a direct query interface, I've now changed to using Dataverse as my backend. But I have lots of videos on doing this exact same thing. But this is a Dataverse direct query report, and that's important. And this one actually happens to be on the run flow, but we're going to go back in, show pushing a data into the data set. And in this case, I'm looking at some different computers. So let's say I want to order a new computer. So let's go ahead and click this add button, and we're going to call this one I like old Datsun Z cars. I don't know if you call them Nissans or Datsuns in Amsterdam. But let's go ahead and call this one the 380Z. That doesn't exist, but it could. And we're going to send it to me because I often actually will do loops with flows, and I don't want to spam a whole bunch of other people. And let's make this one, I actually don't have Dell in here, so I'm going to make this a Dell one. And so I can see it, I want it to be over $2,000. So we're going to make this one $2,500. Okay. Now, this is going to be subtle. When I click on this, I want you to actually look at these. You notice this is $10,000. I don't have a 380Z, and this amount is 10 grand. So let's go ahead and save this. And you'll notice that there's in the upper left-hand corner of these are little glyphs saying that it refreshed. Now today, Power BI and Powerapps have certainly eaten their Wheaties because it's usually not this fast. It usually takes another 2 or 3 seconds, but it's done. We just went out and used Powerapps to go out and write to the real backend. And again, had this been like a SharePoint, this wouldn't have worked because I couldn't have refreshed those visuals. At least I would have had to refresh the data set first and then refresh the visuals. So how easy is this to write? And again, Eric used to do this demo all the time. Let's time it. It is 10:15 now. How long do you think it's going to take me to write that application, Eric? 3 minutes? I see Rez is giving me 3 minutes. Okay, so I don't know. I don't know if that's how much time.
Yeah.
I don't know how much time I should get or I have, but that's what he's recommending. So I'm going to go ahead and I went into edit mode. And by the way, one of the latest features on this visual is that we can now use it in Power BI Desktop. So it's actually kind of cool. We couldn't do that before. So I've added this visual here, and it goes out and says, hey, to get started, you go ahead and drag some of your fields onto the visual pane. And actually, I'm going to drag it in the field well. And what was it? Device name. That's probably enough. Okay. One thing that you can do here in the Powerapps custom visual that Reza cannot do in this Power Automate custom visual because we haven't implemented that yet is the ability to change workspaces. So it's always in the default workspace for Power Automate, but I'm actually going to go ahead and put it into Chuck's world. Yeah, I was going to say I'm looking for Chad's one, but Chad's one is the workspace. Chuck's world is the environment. We're going to choose Create New. And this is actually going to go out and give us a gallery based on the data set in Power BI. So if I go out and apply a filter context here, let's say that I actually go out and show only Dell. I click on this and only show Dell. The only thing that I'm going to see inside of Powerapps is the Dell devices. And I should have been here because actually it was kind of cool to watch this because what it does is it adds these controls. So it looks like I got a couple rows where I didn't add those device names. So that's mea culpa. I should actually go out and clean up my data, but we're not going to use the gallery anyways. What we're going to do is just add those controls to actually add new data. So let's go ahead and go into Insert, Forms, Edit. And here it goes out and says, hey, what table are we looking at? I'm so glad that we renamed entities to tables. And we're looking at the orders in the Dataverse. So this is looking at orders. And this app is now looking at orders. I'm going to go ahead and choose Edit Fields, and we're going to go ahead and add those same ones. So we had price as one of them. There's price. And we had email was one of them. There's email. What was another one? Manufacturer, something like that. I need to spell right. Okay. And I probably don't need created on. Actually, let's go ahead and remove created on when I get a chance. Remove. Okay. It's close enough. I may have missed out a field, and again, what that does is it makes my data dirty, but you get the idea. I want whole control. Let's see if we can do this. There we go. Okay. Now let's go ahead and add those buttons. Last time I did it in the Spanish Summit, I did it with icons. Today we're going to do it with buttons, and we're going to go out and say this is the add button. And what we do here is go out and say, hey, I want a new record. In this case, it's called a form because we have this form. I'm pointing to the screen, but you guys can't see that. And I only have one. And by the way, always rename your controls. Don't leave them the defaults. So this is a do as I say, not as I did scenario or demo. And I'm going to go ahead and have this one here. And this was the save. And save's got some secret sauce that we need to add. So we're going to actually go out and do a submit. So this actually pushes that record back. We only have that form that I haven't renamed. And this is the secret sauce. If I go out and push a record into an underlying direct query data set, if Power BI has a report on it, it won't know to update those visuals, right? There's data set refreshes and there's visual refreshes. And you don't have to worry about the data set refreshes direct query. That's not a thing. But the visuals, yeah, I'm glad, Nick. So you'll definitely want to update the visuals or refresh those visuals. So what we're going to do is use that Power BI integration object that came across with it. It's got a method called refresh. It doesn't take any arguments. It just needs to save it. So let's go ahead and save this. And we're going to call this one the Denmark UG. And you guys, I think, actually correspond to green, if I remember your logos. And we're going to go ahead and save. Hit save. Now, if I go back in here, what you're going to see is a green Denmark UG. There's that green that we chose. It should say Denmark UG in a second. And it actually is going to go out and say getting data. You would actually watch Reza's videos on this. He actually shows a couple of videos on how to overriding this getting data. So I'm going to choose add. This actually puts us in the place to where we can actually have a 390Z. And the price is, I need it to be $2,600. Email is chaz@microsoft.com. Oh, apparently at Microsoft, apparently is what it is. And we're going to make this one for Dell as well. So when I hit save, once again, those little glyphs are appearing, and we should actually see 390Z. This is actually the kind of latency I typically expect, is this kind of, it's about 30 or 40 seconds. It seems longer in doing demos, but it's not, and now we're up to that. So I think I started at 3:16, so it took 4 minutes. We were off by 1 minute, Reza, today. I'll tune it up. I'll get better next time. But that's how easy it is to go out and actually push data back into a data set. And again, you need to think a lot and have a lot of ramifications on if it's outside of direct query. How do you make sure when I push data here, the experience that your customers or your consumers, your reports are actually seeing what they expect? Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to slides and go to the next one, which is actually, so we've actually just did the Powerapps custom visual. Couple other updates that we've made. It is now built in. You don't need to add it as a custom visual. It works in desktop. There was something else. It's certified. It's a certified one. There was something else we added and updated as well. But I don't know that there's any big changes coming in the next couple of months. There's nothing coming anytime soon in talking to the dev team. All right. So the next question I get is that I want it to be refreshed. I actually have an import data set. Can I go out and just put a Power Automate button on here and refresh and do a Power BI refresh and actually see it show up, right? We talked about that. And I actually use this Power BI refresh here. What's the big differences? I told you 3 or 4 times, but this time I'm going to pick on Hans. So Hans, I've said it twice during this demo, but I'm going to ask you, what's the difference between what this is doing and what this Power BI integration refresh is doing? Hans Christensen. Juan Vasquez, you actually unmuted yourself. Maybe you have an answer. Neither. Okay, Lars, your microphone works.
Yeah,
I've told you the answer. What is this one doing?
The Power BI refresh in Power Automate is refreshing your data set.
Okay.
So that will trigger refresh, and the Power BI integration refresh is refreshing the report. So that's the little refresh icon in the upper right-hand corner of your Power BI report.
Yeah, so what Lars is talking about, there's this refresh. That doesn't refresh the data set. This refreshes the visuals. And that's the big difference. That thing that I added here, let's go back. This is the same thing as going out and clicking this. However, I don't want to say that, so we're just going to throw it all the way. If I go out and click on one of these and say, refresh the data set, that's the same thing as going into your gateway and saying, I want you to refresh. So they're very, very different. The same words, different metaphors entirely. So that's important. And the reason I bring it up is, once again, I get asked this at least once a month inside of our own local internal user group. And like I said, Eric, if I give him time, is actually going to demo this at the end. So stick around for that. So this is actually a visual that says, here's the differences. Okay. I wasn't going to demo this, but I do want to let people know, if you haven't played with it, that if you are building Powerapps, you can go out and put tiles inside of your Power App. And you can actually do lots of things that you can't do inside of Power BI. For instance, if I want to actually show tiles from across workspaces in Power BI, I don't know how you do that, actually. You'd have to grab a picture, I guess, put it in a dashboard and link it back to the report. So you have a 3-tier dashboard-ish. But in Powerapps, it's very easy. All of these tiles, or many of these tiles, are in different workspaces. And I can actually go ahead and update those with filter context, something else that's people are asking for slicers all the time to do inside of dashboards. And that's, you have to pin a live report. So again, if you want to actually interact with your Power BI reports in a dashboard-y sort of way, but have limitations, Power Apps might actually help you out. Or if you actually are building a Power App and you actually want to have rich data visualization, it's easy as to go out and take a look at adding Power BI tiles inside your Power Apps. I also have lots of tutorials on this. Reza Doranni actually gave the link already in the chat window, and you can actually see that. So with that, I want to actually go back into here before I actually hand off the microphone to Reza. Let's go back out and take a look at my Dataverse and actually kind of walk him through the lead into where does this Power Automate visual fit into this world. So I showed you how to add one row, right? Power Apps is pretty good about letting you interact, but it's mostly about doing CRUD applications or interacting with the data. What happens if I actually want to update all of these people to let them know that their order is actually going to be ahead of schedule or on time, or it's actually got cheaper, more expensive? This Power Automate button that Reza is going to show you lets you actually go out and do very interesting things across lots of large data sets. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and see if Reza can take over sharing and start with the slide of you, if you've got slides.
All right.
And I'll let you introduce yourself. Again, in addition to being an MVP, he also runs the Houston Usergroup. Anyways, you can take it away. You know a little bit more about yourself than probably I do.
I'm assuming my screen is being shared.
It is.
And you guys can hear me fine. So hello, everyone. This is Reza Doranni. I'm a business applications MVP. I purely focus on the Power Platform space. I am a practice lead at my organization, Catapult Systems. And as Chuck mentioned, I'm the founder and leader of the Houston Power Platform Usergroup. So I'm going to be talking about the new Power Automate visual that's available now in Power BI. This visual allows end users who are accessing your Power BI report to directly go from insights that they're looking at in that report and take an action on those insights. With this new visual, end users can basically trigger a flow run directly from the Power BI report. The flow that gets executed can be aware of the data, that is contextually aware of the data in Power BI. So as Chuck mentioned, if I was to slice and dice my data in Power BI using the refiners of filters, at that instant, the data set is being refined in Power BI. When I trigger the flow directly from that Power BI report, the flow will only get that contextual data. That means you can add dynamic filtering and flow can be aware of that. To use this new visual, you will have to install it because this visual is currently in preview, unlike the Powerapps visual. And once you install this visual and add it to your Power BI report, you have to go and set up your flow, configure your flow, and then apply that flow and relate it to that visual. Now, all of these steps that I have explained or that are there in the slides right here, I will go through in the form of live demos so we can see it in action step by step. So I'll straight away head over to demos. Okay, so demo number one, I have a simple, straightforward Power BI report that is connected to Microsoft Dataverse as a data source in my scenario. This report is built in direct query mode. So here I can see my data. I have a few visualizations here. And now we'll see how we can get started with working with the new Power Automate visual. So inside my Power BI report, if I head over to the three ellipses here to get more visuals, I can go to get more visuals. And if I search for Power Automate and click search, here is the new Power Automate visual that is currently in preview. So you can go ahead and add this visual, which is exactly what I have done as part of my Power BI report. Now, in order for me to add this visual to the Power BI report, I just have to select this. And here is my Power Automate visual being added to the Power BI report. I'm just going to try and place this right here at the bottom, right here. And once you add your visual to your report, the key thing is to pass fields from your data set to the Power BI report exactly the same way you do with the Powerapps visual. So how would I do that? With the visual selected, If I head over to fields, I can see all the fields that are available as part of my data set. And right here, I can decide the data points that I would like to pass over to my Power Automate visual. So in my case, let's say I pass the priority of the task, I pass the number of the task, I pass the name of the task, and maybe I pass, what else? I'll pass the due date of the task. And the date that I'm passing, I'll just pass it as it is. I won't break it down into those elements. So I've decided my fields from my data set in Power BI that I would like to pass over to my Power Automate visual. Now, once you've picked the data points right here, you can go to the 3 ellipses here and go to edit. And what this will do is this will launch Power Automate directly in the context of Power BI. So it's not taking me out of context or taking me to flow.microsoft.com. Everything's happening right here in the Power BI report experience itself. And this is where I can get started to create my Power Automate flows related to the trigger, which is Power BI. And the Microsoft team has currently made 4 templates available for us that we can directly leverage. Update an Excel table with data coming in from Power BI, sending a message to Teams, creating a record in SharePoint, or creating a task in Outlook. So you have 4 ready to go templates that you can leverage and customize. Or if you're like me who likes to start from scratch, you can go to new and specify that you would like to create a new instant cloud flow. Now, firstly, why is it an instant cloud flow? Because the user has to click on a button in the Power BI report. So because there is a button click involved, the only flows that you can create in this scenario are instant flows. So I've picked my instant cloud flow and it has my trigger action defined, which is Power BI button clicked. And after this is where I can add my steps in my flow. So just as an example, I'll add a compose action and flow. And right here, if I go to input, I want to show you what we get under dynamic content. So from the trigger itself, you get a lot of these key data points, like what's the user ID who has clicked that button in the Power BI report? What's the name of the user? What's the email of the user? At which date and time did the user click on that button? So all of those pieces of information are available for us out of the box here under dynamic content. Additionally, I also get those fields that I passed or that I connected from my Power BI dataset to my Power Automate visual. And these were the 4 fields that I selected right here on the right-hand side: priority, task number, name, and due date. And we can see all those fields right here. Now, if I was to pick any of these data points here, so let's say I pick the priority, immediately Power Automate goes ahead and adds an apply to each loop. Now, why does this happen? It's because when you're passing data from Power BI contextually to Power Automate or Powerapps, the data is always passed in the form of an array. So even though I'm passing one record, it will go in the form of an array. And that's the reason why Power Automate will always add and apply to each loop on top of that data set that you're passing over from Power BI to Flow. Now that we've understood these basic concepts of how I can read those data points, how if I go to dynamic content, what are the different pieces of information I receive. Now what I can do right here is, let's say, based on the user clicking the button, I want to send an email, and someone asked that question in the chat as well. So I will use a select data operation and flow, and select basically expects an array. So where's my array coming from? Well, that array is coming from my Power BI data item. In fact, I take that back. Let me delete this and let me add the select action again. I say select, let's go to from. That data is coming from my, for some reason it's not showing the Power BI data today. It's okay. We can go back here and pick Power BI data. That's what I need. This is in preview, so we do get some challenging things. So this is what I need. I need this value to come right here. So that's the array. And within this array, I have my data points, like, for example, the priority. I have the task number. So I'm going to say, okay, this is priority and this is task number. I'm just passing 2 pieces of information here. So I've just created an array right here on the fly and put it in a select operation. So I can just select specific elements from that array. And that's exactly what I've done. Now, because I want to send an email, I want to send a table. So I'll select the data operation again called create HTML table. And I want to create a table from the output of my select action. So this will give me an HTML table. And now finally, I'm ready to send an email. So I will use the send an email action right here in Flow. And who do I want to send this email to? Well, I want to send it to the user who clicked the Power BI button. So I'll select that. Subject will be Power BI data. And in the body, I will put the output of this HTML table. Of course, this is Flow. You can take any action you want. You can put this data in your system of record, update some system of record, notify users. All of the actions in Flow are available for you to leverage right here. Once you have your Flow built, I will recommend you name it correctly. So I'm going to call this Power BI data set sample. I'm just testing this. So I'll click save. And this now goes ahead and saves my Flow. Now bear in mind, I've just created my Flow and saved my Flow. I have not yet applied this Flow to the visual. This is an extremely important step. Once you save your Flow, you hit this back button right here, not this one, but this one. And here you get this option to click apply. When you hit apply, you're basically applying this Flow to that visual that you created in the Power BI report. And once I have the success message, now I can go back to the report. And if you observe here, this visual has turned into a button that the user can click. So let me save this and let me refresh my Power BI report. Okay, so here's my visual. And what I can do right now is go ahead and click this button. And when I click this, it says triggering. So it's triggering the Flow, and triggered meaning it has started the Flow. Now, does it run into any errors, exceptions? What happens there? Well, that you have to handle inside of Flow. All this button does right now is just calls the Flow and contextually passes the data from Power BI to Power Automate. Now, if I actually go to my mailbox and fingers crossed on this, you can see that I passed 4 pieces of information from Power BI to Flow. And in Flow, I just picked those 2 data points, priority and task number. So these are all the tasks and these are all the priorities specific to those tasks. Now, where is all this data coming from? This data is coming from my data set in my Power BI report. And all of this, I can slice and dice the data, right? So let's say I'm only interested in my tasks that are in progress. So if I select in progress, this has applied the filter to my Power BI data set. Now, if I run my Flow, the experience is going to be exactly the same. However, it will only pass these 3 records from Power BI to Flow. And if I go to my email now, we should only have 3 tasks with those 3 priorities. And these are those 3 task numbers. And this is exactly the data that you see right here. Now, this was a very simple example of how data contextually passes from Power BI to Flow. I'll show you a couple of other examples here. I have another button right here that says send data to Microsoft Teams. So if I select this, this is triggering another Flow that is associated with this button. And what this Flow does is it basically goes ahead, grabs the data contextually, creates an adaptive card. And if I go back to my Teams, I can see that Flow sent me a adaptive card experience in Teams, basically a message in Teams that says, okay, here's the data that you passed from the Power BI data set. So I can see that information right here in Microsoft Teams. Or I can even go ahead and say, you know what, go ahead and create tasks in Outlook. This is a task management system. So I have these 3 tasks that are in progress. I want them to be in Microsoft To Do as well. So go ahead and create them. And the moment I do that, I just clicked it. Here are those 3 tasks that have actually come into my Microsoft To Do. The point being, you can integrate with any system of your choice. I'll show you one last example, I'll probably take 3 more minutes for this one. I will head over to a different Power BI report. Once again, the data set is very similar, a task management system. Once again, I'll take the same steps. I add a flow, same concept. I select the data point that I want to pass. In this case, I'll just pass the ID of my task. That's all I'm going to pass. That's the unique key associated with the task. And once I'm done with this, I will go to edit. Same experience as before. It will launch flow. And here, I will again create an instant flow. And this time, let's say I want to modify data based on that Power BI report. So the data set in my case is Dataverse. It could be SQL, SharePoint, any data source of your choice. So let's say I want to update my data. So I'll select Microsoft Dataverse and I will select the action update rows. I will choose my table, which is called work task. And it is asking me for the row ID. This is that data point that I passed. That's the only one I passed, so I can select this. It will apply the loop because it's an array. And when it is updating my rows, I just wanted to change the status of my task to maybe completed. Okay, so I'm going to say complete tasks. That's the name of my flow. Same steps. I click save. It saves my flow. I have to wait for it to save. Once the flow saves, I have to hit this back button to go and ensure that I apply the flow to my visual. And once all of this is in place, if I head back to my report, save it, and run this report. So this report is showing me all my tasks. I believe the status of all my tasks is in progress. This report is a bit slow. It's still loading. If I was to go and click this button, it will trigger the flow. So I click this, it triggers the flow. The flow will go ahead and start updating all the data in my backend data set. Now, unlike Powerapps, Chuck earlier showed that you can use Power BI integration.refresh, where you can refresh the visual in case of your data set being in direct query mode. In Power Automate, you cannot do that today. However, if the user was to refresh the report or come back to the report, and if that flow ran correctly, we can see that the status of all my tasks here have changed to completed. So it's kind of a bulk update of the data set that I'm viewing in Power BI by triggering a Power Automate flow. So these were some of my demos that I added. Of course, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I know Eric also has a demo to give. So I will hand the floor over to Eric.
A couple of questions that you might be able to help with.
Sure.
Domantas, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes.
Or
the problem is when I'm trying to generate similar report, other users trying to run the flow gets error saying they are not allowed to send email from this account, some kind of Outlook error. I have added them as run-only users in Power Automate, but it's not helping for some reason.
So I'm assuming this is okay. So you're running. Okay, I'm assuming your scenario is different here. You have a flow that triggers based on what? What's the trigger of your flow? Manual, SharePoint.
Power BI report, as well as you show just a table with some emails in it. So I want the user clicking the button to get and run it.
So if you want the user clicking the button to get the email, you can use the steps that I demoed right now, wherein you can use that user email attribute to send over the email. But the email will go from the flow gets called from that user's context.
That is exactly what I'm not able to get to run.
Okay. Of course, we'll have to debug. So yeah. you can reach out to me. Reach out to me on Twitter. I'll put my Twitter handle there. Reach out to me, and then we can maybe you share your screenshots, or even better, you can go to the community forums and post your issue with screenshots. I'll put the links in the chat.
That. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I am reading the comments as well. So anybody wants to go off mute? Tabs. You don't use vertical tabs in Edge. Yeah, I need to start using that. Thank you. No. Question: in a similar scenario, I'm not able to let the users run. Okay, that was the question. If the data, there was an image URL, would it be able to email the product image with the email being sent? Great question. If it was a URL to an image, I think it would still go in as a URL. However, in Power Automate, there are actions that allow you to get the binary of that data so you can embed it directly in an image. So there are ways around that. To answer your question, great question. I haven't yet tried that out. Nick says this blows my mind. Well, mine too. What the flow visual is still missing is the direct feedback on the flow run history. You only get triggered, but absolutely right. I think what it is missing right now is definitely feedback. Something like when Powerapps calls flow, you can send data back. You can tell Powerapps whether the flow was successful, not successful. You have an option. I feel that's missing here. Another thing what's missing is a potential refresh of the visual like we can do in Powerapps. Specifically for scenarios around direct query. So I think that would be cool if we could, if those options would be available. So I'm hoping Chuck is listening. Good to know you watching as well, Nick. Can you call an API and trigger an action to downstream? So from Power Automate, you can call any API of your choice. You can even build your own custom connectors. Once you go into the context of flow, the entire Power Automate spectrum is open for you.
And where is the flow stored, Reza? In which environment?
Great question. So currently, this visual, of course, it's in preview. If I actually head over to flow.microsoft.com just to prove where are these flows going into, all of these flows only and only go into the default environment today. So you can see the flows that I just created are all lined up right here. They only go into the default environment. You cannot place it in any other environment today, but I am pretty confident once it goes into GA, just like we have in Powerapps, we should be able to select the environments in which we want this flow to be packaged in or created in.
Great. Yeah, it is preview, so I guess
don't use it in
expect,
production scenarios.
Yeah.
Please don't use it in production scenarios. It is preview. Things can change. Potentially things could break. For the better, of course. The team is going to work to improve this. But if you're using it in production scenarios, because it's in preview, you run the risk of a potential change impacting your existing business process. Python script or PowerShell script can be run with Flow. With Flow, no, but through Flow, you can call Azure functions and the whole world is open for you. I've done that for a customer, actually, PowerShell. Can flows or Power Automate be stored in repos? That is, they are JSON. So flows don't have versioning. They only get stored in the cloud. So if you make a change, you cannot go back to the previous version. However, technically it is JSON. So you can write a flow that packages a flow and stores it in your system of record. So you have the versions of those JSONs. So you could do things like that, but out of the box, that option is not available. All great questions.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll keep an eye on the chat, but Eric, you can go ahead with your demo. So I'll stop presenting.
Perfect. I will share my Power BI desktop then. And hopefully you can see my Power BI desktop now.
We can see it.
Okay, so what I've built is actually a small report that uses a Power BI REST API connector developed by Miguel Escobar, a Power BI Power Query guru, in order for me to retrieve a list of all the workspaces that I have access to, and also the data sets. So by going to his GitHub, I could download a custom connector that enabled me to to use a connector called Power BI REST API, and then I could navigate and get a list of data sets and workspaces. So let me just show you that I went into more, and because I had installed this custom connector, hopefully this will come up. It's now in Power Platform, and I have a Power BI API connector. And then I get a list of functions, personal workspace, because I'm a service administrator on this workspace, but I can also retrieve information about workspaces, i.e. their workspaces and reports, but also datasets. So I chose to import datasets and workspaces and got my two tables in my model. Hit close and apply, and it automatically detects the relationship between workspaces and datasets in the specific workspace. So in my workspace table, I have a list of all the workspaces I have access to, and in the datasets, a list of data sets. And then I put in a slicer where I can select a given workspace, and I can see the data sets in a table up here. I can see information about the data sets, etc. But now I want to refresh a select either one or all the data sets that are stored in the workspace. So I added the Power Automate button, and on this visual, I used the Power Automate data with the workspace ID and the dataset ID. So what is sent at the moment to Power Automate is a workspace ID and a dataset ID. If I remove the filter, you can see it gets all three datasets. And oops, that was the wrong one. Let me just change this visual to a Power Automate visual again. Then we can click Edit. And I've already created one, but let's create a new. So we'll create an instant Cloudflow. And I can add a new step and call the refresh of a dataset. This will give me the possibility to either select from the names that it knows that I'm logged on as, but I can also use a custom value. And as Reza showed, we will get a list of the fields that we put into the visual. So I want the workspace ID to be entered here. And because we get an array, we get an apply to each. And the refresh data set is now in here. And the data on the field workspace ID is applied to the workspace field. And if we select dataset here, we can again select the ID coming from our data. Hit save to save it, and we should refresh demo. Just hit save and then go back. Did I forget something? Perhaps it's a preview. I link it to this that I made earlier. Hit apply. So now the refresh selected dataset is applied to my button, and I can go back to my report. And then I could, of course, also change. So this is not run. It could be refresh selected datasets. I can change the fill so it's company colors or whatever. And I don't want to add a title. And now let me just find a report. So this playground here is update my data. That's a data set that is, let me just show you. It's the only thing it contains is a is a Power Query that retrieves the local time. So the last time I checked whether it worked was so the data set in this report is now last refreshed at 4:36 p.m. But let's go over to our report here. Click the button. It's triggered, and when we return to the workspace, we will see that it's updated here 7:55, and entering the report, we hopefully, if we hit refresh, we can see that the data is updated. So by having a list of workspace IDs, datasets ID, we can now let the users actually trigger a dataset refresh from within a Power BI report. That's pretty cool.
That is really cool.
Okay. Any other questions in the chat?
There was a lot of chatter around what's premium, what's not premium. No one wants to pay the premium license cost. Eric, can I ask a few questions on your demo? Really interesting. Sure. The list of workspace IDs, and sorry, I missed that part. I was in the chat when you actually showed. Yeah. How are you getting all that data around workspace ID and dataset IDs? Was that a custom API that you were calling to generate that data for you?
It's a custom connector that Miguel Escobar from Powered Solutions has created. Okay. So let me just show you. It's this one.
Okay.
So he has developed a custom connector for Power BI that uses the Power BI REST API. Okay. So he has simply packaged the Power BI REST API into a connector.
Nice.
And so you can download. Yeah, it's free. So you can download the connector from this from here. And yes, it's free. And if you want to do it via the service, you have to install this custom connector on a gateway, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it won't work.
And Eric, the refreshing piece that you were showing in Flow, I believe that only works for data sets in import query mode, or I don't think it works for direct query based data sets, right?
No, I wouldn't expect that.
Right. And you will be limited as well, right, to how many refreshes you can make, because that then goes on your license as to okay, you've made 8 refreshes or you've made, I believe 32 is the other one. I'm sorry, I'm not too familiar with the numbers, but
I think it's 32 as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you don't need to refresh a direct query data set. So
no.
So that's why. And for a pro license, you have, it's also in the chat, you have 8 daily refreshes. With Pro, and with Premium, you actually have unlimited number of refreshes. But you have to remember that when you do a refresh, then you're also putting some workload on your data source. So you don't want to refresh every second.
No. Yeah, and if you have an XMLA endpoint, you could actually extend and use Power Automate in order to make incremental refreshes or only specific tables as well. That is possible as well. But that will require premium, as far as I know.
That's correct. Premium capacity or premium per user?
Yeah. So is there a way to Power Automate provisioning of workspaces? So i.e. create workspaces, I guess. I think the Power BI REST API supports it. So using Power Automate, you should be able to create workspaces using Power Automate. And any more questions? Otherwise, I will just put in a link to an evaluation of today's session.
The link says something went wrong.
Let me just find the right one. And here it is. And share and shorten and copy. Yeah, hopefully this works. And then the last thing to mention is, remember next week's meetup with the Chaticulator. You can do amazing visualizations with that. And also, there is a limited number of seats for the Power BI conference in September. So sign up before it's too late. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining, Reza, and Chuck as well, for stepping in and showing us this awesome feature.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you. And thank you, everyone. I see all the amazing comments in the chat. So thank you.
Good. Yeah, thank you very much, and have a great evening, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, bye.